Somewhere in a stack of 48 episodes, one episode held one of the strongest IMDb ratings in the Dexter franchise for over a decade. Producers circulated decoy scripts and fake alternate endings, and had staff sign non-disclosure agreements just to keep the ending secret. That level of secrecy shows how bad they needed this reveal protected. So today we're going inside that episode, scene by scene, to see exactly how it was built to break its main character. Getting a perfect score on IMDb is close to impossible. Millions of people watch television now, and it only takes a small group of angry fans to knock a rating down. But one episode of Showtime's Dexter held a 9.8 out of 10 on IMDb for years, the highest rating any episode of the original series ever earned. Even most of the people making the show did not know how it would end. Producers circulated decoy scripts and fake alternate endings to protect the twist, and the staff, as I mentioned earlier, were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. So what makes one episode of television land like that? It is 4 seasons of a man trying to convince himself, his family, and the audience that he could be normal, all collapsing in the final 10 minutes. Today, we're going to walk through exactly how The Getaway builds this collapse piece by piece, and why it still gets talked about as one of the most complete episodes in the history of the medium. This is not a case where one twist ending saved a mediocre episode. Much of the episode's payoff has been prepared throughout the season, even though the writers finalized Rita's fate relatively late in production. And that is the difference between a shocking scene and a great episode. The story behind this episode starts long before December 2009, and it starts with a title that can be read more than one way. The Getaway aired on Showtime on December 13, 2009. It was the 12th and final episode of Season 4, the 48th episode of the series overall, directed by Steve Schill, with a teleplay written by Wendy West and Melissa Rosenberg, based on a story by Rosenberg and Scott Reynolds. This was also the last episode produced under showrunner Clyde Phillips, who left the series after this season to spend more time with his family. According to Nielsen ratings, the episode was watched by 2.6 million households, making it the most watched original series episode in Showtime's history at the time. The title can be read on 2 levels. On one level, Arthur Mitchell, the man known as the Trinity Killer, is preparing to abandon his life and flee after both Dexter and the authorities close in on his identity. He strips his house of cash, jewelry, and anything he can sell before running. On the second level, Dexter and Rita are preparing for a delayed honeymoon in the Florida Keys. After a season of tension in their marriage, both getaways are about escape. Neither one works out the way the person planning it hoped it would. Season 4 spent all 12 episodes building the idea that Arthur Mitchell was a mirror for Dexter. Arthur was also a serial killer. Arthur also had a wife and kids. Arthur had also built a life that looked normal from the outside while hiding something monstrous underneath it. Dexter studies Arthur because he appears to have maintained both a family and a hidden life as a killer, and Dexter wants to know if that balance is really possible. The Getaway is the episode where that hope gets tested for real, and it does not survive the test. Most finales rush their setup in the last 10 minutes. This one has spent an entire season laying track, so by the time the episode starts, most of the pieces of the ending are already sitting on the board, waiting to be moved. But before any of that pays off, the show had to make sure almost nobody knew what was coming, and the way they pulled that off is its own story. Showrunner Clyde Phillips had said publicly that the writing staff did not settle on how Rita would leave the show until fairly late into Season 4, but once they landed on it, keeping it quiet became its own operation. Julie Benz, who played Rita, was officially informed during a private meeting shortly before the final script was distributed to the wider cast. She even described the way her character's ending was written as, in her own words, poetic, even though she was disappointed to be leaving the show. To protect the twist from leaking before broadcast, the production circulated decoy scripts and fake alternate endings, watermarked sensitive materials, and required staff to sign non-disclosure agreements. Only essential personnel were given access to the real ending during filming, which allowed much of the wider production to stay unaware of it. That is the level of secrecy you do not see on a network drama, and it tells you the writers understood exactly what they had. If word got out that Rita was going to die in the final minutes, the entire episode would have played differently. Every scene where Rita talks about the future would have felt like a countdown instead of a normal domestic moment. If a show can keep audiences, entertainment reporters, and much of its own production from learning the ending beforehand, That's not luck, that is control. Keeping a twist hidden from the audience is common. Keeping it hidden from most of your own cast and crew is rare, and it's a sign the writers knew this ending needed to land with zero warning to work. If breakdowns like this are your thing, subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Let's get back into the episode. With the secret locked down, the episode itself had one final piece of business to close out first, and that was Arthur Mitchell. For most of season 4, Dexter hesitates. He has Arthur in his sights multiple times and does not act, partly because he's fascinated by Arthur's family life, and partly because Harry, Dexter's adoptive father, who appears throughout the show as kind of an internal conscience, keeps warning him that killers like Arthur eventually destroy everyone around them. By the time the getaway starts, Arthur knows Dexter's real name and his job at Miami Metro. Arthur warns Dexter to leave him alone, now armed with that information about Dexter's identity and career. That threat is what finally pushes Dexter to act. Dexter first follows Arthur to a bank, but loses him after a confrontation leads to Dexter briefly being detained. He later tracks Arthur through his damaged car, captures him near the auto repair shop, and takes him to a prepared kill room inside the vacant house connected to Arthur's most recent child victim. The kill itself plays out as a conversation as much as a struggle. Arthur frames his fate in religious terms and suggests that the events unfolding around him were inevitable, out of his control. Dexter pushes back, telling him that waiting to be stopped is not the same thing as actually trying to change. It is one of the few moments in the whole series where Dexter says out loud what he wants to believe about himself. He wants to believe his attachment to Rita and the children makes him different from Arthur. Dexter kills Arthur with a hammer, then dismembers the body and disposes of the remains at sea, and drives home believing he's finally closed this chapter for good. This scene works because Dexter is not just killing a villain, he's trying to kill the version of himself that Arthur represents. He wants proof that he can do this and still come home to a family that loves him. The episode lets him believe that for exactly as long as it takes for him to drive home. While Dexter is settling his score with Arthur, his sister Deborah is closing in on a completely different secret, one that has nothing to do with the Trinity killer at all. All season, Deborah has been chasing down the identity of one of their late father Harry's confidential informants, a woman she does not yet know is connected to Dexter. Deborah's investigation leads her to the truth, with Deputy Chief Tom Matthews confirming Harry's relationship with a woman named Laura Moser, and the circumstances surrounding Dexter's adoption. Laura Moser was murdered years earlier in a shipping container, and she left behind 2 young sons. Deborah tells Dexter directly that Laura Moser was his biological mother, and that Harry found the young Dexter at the shipping container crime scene after Laura's murder and later adopted him. She also revealed that Dexter's biological brother was Brian Moser, the ice truck killer who terrorized Miami back in season 1. Brian's season 1 crimes were ultimately revealed to be connected to his attempt to reach and reunite with Dexter. This is one of the biggest pieces of Dexter's backstory in the entire series, and the show chooses to drop it in the same hour it kills off Rita, which is not by accident. Both reveals are about the same idea. The things that shaped Dexter into what he is were never fully in his control, going all the way back to a childhood he barely remembers. Dexter's reaction is quiet. He does not want to hear the rest of it. He tells Deborah not to say anything more, and for a moment it looks like this revelation is going to sit there unresolved, one more thing that Dexter has to carry. But the show is not finished loading weight onto him yet, because right after this conversation, Dexter allows himself a few minutes to actually feel good about his life. And that is exactly when the episode turns the knife. Most shows would build an entire episode around a reveal this big. Here, it is treated as one more piece of a much bigger collapse, which tells you how much the writers were willing to spend in a single episode just to set up the final scene. That final scene starts with something as simple as a voicemail, and it might be one of the most devastating uses of a phone message in the entire series. After killing Arthur, Dexter drives home in a rare moment of peace. He believes he had protected his family, closed out the Trinity case, and proven that he can be good for the people he loves. He checks a voicemail from Rita, who explained she had to turn back home because she forgot her ID for their trip to the Keys, and tells him she loves him before hanging up. As Dexter continues home, his own internal narration reflects on the moon that night, and the idea that he and Rita are connected beneath the same light, a thought that belongs to Dexter, not to Rita's message. It is an ordinary voicemail, a wife running late, a reminder that she loves him. That is exactly why it works. The show spends the whole episode building towards violence with Arthur, then hands you the softest, most human moment in the entire episode right before the ending, so that when Dexter walks through his front door a few minutes later, he is not braced for what he finds. The scene avoids making the danger obvious, letting the domestic normality of Rita's message conceal what Dexter is about to discover. He calls out for Rita. He hears his infant son Harrison crying from somewhere in the house. He follows the sound into the bathroom. This is the calm the entire episode has been quietly building towards, and it only works because the show refuses to give you any obvious warning signs. It plays like real life does, which is exactly why the next scene hits as hard as it does. That walk down the hallway leads to the image most people remember Dexter for, and it did not happen by accident. Dexter opens the bathroom door and finds Rita dead in the bathtub, in a manner that echoes Arthur's earlier killings. Although the murders happen off-screen, the episode and later production commentary point to Arthur as her killer, having reached her before Dexter killed him. Their son Harrison is sitting on the bathroom floor, crying in a pool of his mother's blood. The show does not treat this as a random act of violence. It echoes Dexter's own origin story. Dexter was found as a small child in a pool of his biological mother, Laura Moser's blood, after her murder, an image the show has referenced across earlier seasons. The scene echoes that childhood trauma, while Deborah's investigation earlier in the same episode has just brought his biological family history back to the surface. Harrison is now living through the same kind of trauma that shaped Dexter in the first place. The cycle Dexter spent the whole season hoping he could break with his own family instead repeats itself in his own home with his own son. Arthur got the last word after all. Every ounce of hope Dexter built up in the previous 20 minutes, the belief that he could kill Arthur and still come home to a normal family, gets erased in a single shot of a crying baby in a blood-covered bathroom. The show never lets Dexter enjoy the win. It takes the win away from him in the same episode he earns it. This is not a twist for the sake of shock. It can be read as the entire season's argument finally proven. Dexter spent the season trying to convince himself that he was fundamentally different from Arthur Mitchell, a killer who initially appeared to have balanced murder with family life, before Dexter discovered that Arthur's supposedly normal household was actually built on terror and abuse. This final image can be read as the show's brutal answer to Dexter's hope that he might be different. Now let us know in the comments, do you think that Dexter could have saved Rita if he would have killed Arthur even one episode earlier? Or was this always going to happen no matter what he did? The reaction to Getaway was immediate. Critics and fans largely praised the episode, though Rita's death was also controversial for some viewers, with outlets at the time calling it one of the most shocking moments television had produced up to that point. John Lithgow won the 2010 Emmy for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series for his performance as Arthur Mitchell, with Roadkill listed as a submitted episode. And he also won the 2010 Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a Television Series, Miniseries, or Television Film for the same role. Steve Schill also won the 2010 Emmy for Outstanding Directing for a Drama Series specifically for The Getaway. At the time of writing, The Getaway holds a 9.8 IMDb rating, and for years remained the highest rated episode of the original 8-season series. Season 4 is frequently ranked by fans and television critics as one of the show's strongest seasons, and this finale is frequently cited by fans and retrospective commentators as the original series' standout episode. The ending has also inspired a recurring fan argument that the series could have concluded with this episode rather than continuing on for 4 more seasons. A rating that high across a fanbase that argues about everything else in this show is not something that happens by accident. Its reputation comes partly from how tightly viewers perceive its major storylines to converge. The secrecy, the reveal about Dexter's mother, the kill, the voicemail, and the ending all land in the same hour. The Getaway earns its reputation because it does not rely on a cheap, unearned twist. The show gives you enough information for the ending to feel inevitable in retrospect, while withholding the one action, Arthur reaching Rita, that would expose it in advance. You know Dexter's whole life started with a murdered mother and a child sitting in her blood. You know Arthur has acquired enough information about Dexter to threaten his private life. By the time Dexter hears Rita's voicemail, you know she had returned home alone. The show gives you almost every piece and still finds a way to make the final scene land like you never saw it coming. That is the difference between an episode that shocks you and an episode that earns the shock. Its principal storylines ultimately converge around the final image of Dexter and Harrison in the bathroom, built out of 4 seasons of character work, 1 season of careful setup, and a production that kept knowledge of the ending restricted to essential personnel. When Dexter finally opens that door, the show does not blink. If this is the kind of breakdown you want to see more of, subscribe and hit the bell so you do not miss the next one. And let me know in the comments which other show finale you think deserves the same kind of deep dive.